So I looked at some of the assignments that have been handed in for our SEC paragraphs, and I think that we need to review again literary commentary and how to write it. One sentence is not enough. We have to use the techniques that we had gone over so that we have good literary commentary. Now, when we looked at the past student examples that they had submitted in previous AP tests, the one thing that we found was that the scores that were the highest was because students had good literary commentary. They didn't retell the plot. They explained how the author was using a specific literary device to develop the ideas, the themes of the story. And I'm going to say it again, one sentence is not enough. And I'm going to repeat it. One sentence is not enough. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back and review what we had gone over this year. Because good commentary equals a 9. Bad commentary, good luck. All right, now, the first thing that we have to have either written down, since it's open note, open book, it's pretty easy. You have to know the definition and the function of the literary device employed by the author. This is how you make the comment, by knowing the definition and the function and using the technique who, what, where, when, why, and how. It's the answer to these questions that you're going to create multiple sentences of commentary. Remember, commentary is you making an inference on what the author is trying to convey through the use of this particular device. Multiple sentences. One sentence is not enough. So let's look at an example. An author uses imagery. What is the definition of imagery? Imagery means to use figurative language to represent objects, actions, and ideas in such a way that it appeals to our physical senses. The function of imagery in literature is to generate a vibrant and graphic presentation of a scene that appeals to as many of the reader's senses as possible. It aids the reader's imagination to envision the characters and scenes in the literary piece clearly. Apart from the above-mentioned function, images drawn by using figures of speech like metaphor, simile, personification, and onomatopoeia serve the function of beautifying a piece of literature. This definition and function comes from literarydevices.net. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to use the ideas in the definition and function of the imagery to create multiple sentence commentaries or sentences of commentary. We're going to take these ideas and words and create plug and play sentences that we can incorporate when we write about any type of literature. Now, after reading the definition and function of imagery, what I want to ask myself is, what are the key words and phrases in the definition and function that we can use to create good commentary? So I want to identify the nouns, the verbs, and the adjectives. And we're going to use these words to generate our templates for the term that can be applied to any example of imagery that we're going to use. Now, what I want you to do is stop the video now, roll it back, go to the definition and function, and freeze it. And on your own, I want you to try to create template sentences with the words and ideas. When you have accomplished this task, start the video back up where we're at right now and look at the examples that I have put together. Okay, now hopefully you didn't just blow right through and you actually did the exercise and created your sentence templates. It's important to practice these ideas. These are my sentence templates. So what I did was I went through the definition and function and I wrote these sentences that I could plug and play in my commentary. No matter what the piece is, as long as it's dealing with imagery, these are the words and ideas I want to use. First, the figurative language presented in the quote represents blank in a way that appeals to the sense of blank. Now, a tree could represent life, dust represent time, a fork in the road could represent choices. And what physical sense does this image appeal to? Because what the author's trying to do is to take his theme that he's presenting, which is unfamiliar, and associate it with the reader in something that they are familiar with. And this is done through imagery. For instance, we had read Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken. So we have a fork in the road, and I could plug this sentence in like this. This is kind of rough, so I'm just doing it on the fly. The figurative language presented in the above quote represents choices in a way that appeals to the sense of a visual sense. Okay, so he's in the poem. I'm sitting there, look, and I can visually see this fork in the road, which represents choices. So it allows me, the reader, to associate the theme that Frost is trying to develop with something I'm already familiar with. Next, generates a vibrant and graphic presentation of something that appeals to the sense of something. So here we have, let's say, presentation of life, death, hope, loss, and the reader can associate the complex ideas to the physical sense. So I could say, talking about Frost again, generates a vibrant and graphic presentation of choices that appeals to the visual sense of the reader, and then I will explain, make a difference why. Next, aids in the imagination to envisioning something clearly. So again, we're relating a complex theme to something familiar. Lastly, the figurative language, blank, serves the function of beautifying or not beautifying, blank, by appealing to the familiar sense of blank. So what the author's trying to do with imagery is relate complex ideas, the theme, to the reader by associating the idea that's familiar with them. And that's the purpose of imagery. Now I have these sentence templates, not exact. I'm going to adjust them as I go, but it helps me get a start. So if I'm dealing with imagery, this is what I want to have in front of me when I'm taking the test in my notes so that I can plug and play. Okay, now let's take a look at an example. And here we have a quote from Charles Dickens' Great Expectations, where Pip, the hero of the novel, uses many images to describe a damp morning in the marsh. Now, the purpose that Dickens is trying to accomplish is to allow the reader to associate through the images he creates with the theme that he's developing, so that something that's not familiar can be associated with something you are familiar with and give you an understanding. So, it was a rimy morning and very damp. I had seen the damp lying on the outside of my little window. Now I saw the damp lying on the bare hedges and spare grass. On every rail and gate, wet lay clammy. And the marsh mist was so thick that the wooden finger on the post directing people to our village, a direction which they never accepted, for they never came, was invisible to me until I was quite close under it. All right. So the repeated words of damp and wet make us feel how miserable it was for him. The damp and cold morning, the thick marsh mist aids our imagination to visualize the scene of the morning in the marshland. So what words and phrases are repeated? So as this is how I'm going to do it. I have to do these exercises, then I put them in my plug and play sentences. So what words and phrases are repeated that have similar ideas? Well, we have rimy, very damp, damp, lying, bare hedges, spare grass, wet, clammy, marsh mist, thick, wooden finger, never accepted, never came, invisible to me. So as I'm starting to think about writing the commentary, I already have my plug and play sentence frames that I'm going to use. I want to identify the words and phrases within the text that appeal to my senses. Next, I want to say, well, to what senses do these words appeal? So I want to focus on the verbs. I saw, lay clammy, mist was thick, never accepted, never came, invisible. So these are words that create an image in my mind that help me understand what the author's trying to say. So this is visual and tactile. So I see it and I can feel it. You go out in the morning, you can just feel the wet, clammy all over you. Next, I want to think about the tone of the words. What emotions or mood do they create? So we look at the tone and the mood So I want you to look at the tone and mood handout that I gave you, and it'll give you the words and phrases. This is the tone of the words the author uses that create the mood that the reader feels. So I looked at it and I said, well, gloomy, barren, inhospitable, neglected, forsaken, defeated, hopeless. So these are the words. They're not in the text, right? Because we're making an inference. That's what commentary is. These are the words that describe the words the author uses and how I feel as I read them, because I'm making an inference. One sentence doesn't do it. More than one sentence. Let's look at the example. All right, now I'm going to write some commentary on the previous example, Charles Dickens. Now remember, you're not going to retell the story. That's why we're using this chart: who, what, where, when, why, and how. What this allows me to do is generate answers to questions that I can use in my commentary. Commentary is always about the author, what the author is doing with the particular literary device. Let's look at an example. So who am I talking about? Charles Dickens. If it's not about Charles Dickens in your commentary, it's wrong. What is he doing? Well, he's developing the mood through imagery. Remember, he has the imagery, the words that he uses have a tone that create a mood for me, the reader. Where is he doing it? Great Expectations. When is he doing it? Well, when Pip, the hero of the novel, describes the morning. Why is he doing it? To convey a theme of gloom and hopelessness. That's what I figured he's doing, gloom and hopelessness with this. How is he doing it? The words and phrases that appeal to the senses of the reader so that it can associate with the familiar with the unfamiliar. Now, I'm taking these ideas and I'm keeping in mind my templates that I made for imagery, the definition and function. I'm going to write more than one sentence. One sentence is not good enough. Let's take a look at my first one. In the above quote, Dickens utilizes figurative language that represents gloom and birds going overhead. What are you going to do? In the above quote, Dickens utilizes figurative language that represents gloom and hopelessness in a way that appeals to the visual and tactile senses. So that comes from my template, the sentences that I made. All I did was just change it a little bit and put in the ideas that Dickens is using in that particular quote. Next. The tone he uses generates this mood and allows the reader to internalize the scene by associating the known with the theme he is creating. I'm just using the definition and function. I'm taking the answers to my questions, and now I have two sentences. Oh, a third sentence, because look at the example here. The imagery created by the words rimy, damp, bare, spare, and clammy aids the imagination of the reader to clearly envision a gloomy, barren, neglected, and forsaken scene. That comes from the definition. All I did was plugged in the words and ideas that Dickens was creating. Now, lastly, I thought about, well, that finger. That was pretty good. The figurative language describing the post serves the function of creating a death-like atmosphere by appealing to the sense of fear. All right, so there's my commentary. I didn't paraphrase anything that was in the quote itself. All I did was I used my template sentences about imagery, and I wrote an inference of what I believe Dickens was doing. That's commentary. By using my techniques, who, what, where, when, why, and how, by taking the words and phrases that are in the definition and function and making plug-and-play templates, I have good commentary. That's a 9. One sentence is not enough. Don't be lazy. We already went over this technique. It's easy if you take your time, and you'll get an A. Let me emphasize again. One sentence is not commentary. I've given you all the techniques to use to create good commentary. We take the definition and the function from literarydevices.net, and I'm going to have many more videos on all the literary devices I think we're going to need for this test, and create templates by using the definition and function. We can take these templates and generate plug and play frameworks that we can use on anything that we read about. Then by using the who, what, where, when, why, and how technique, we can generate multiple sentences of commentary. The focus of the commentary should explain how and why the author uses a particular literary device. Don't retell the story. Commentary is about the author, the literary device, and the effect that the device has upon the reader. That's the mood, tone, mood, imagery. Right here, this is what we're writing about. It's got to be an inference of the author's purpose. Don't write one sentence commentary. All right, now I'm working on tone and mood, which I'll be having up shortly, but I wanted to make this one real quick so that everybody is refreshed on the techniques that we had covered on writing good literary commentary. Good luck.